Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining the HCP Conversations Knowledge Series, Let's Talk About Performance. A very warm welcome to all our speakers, HC partners, and IHRP community. My name is Jason, your MC for today. Today's webinar is brought to you by TAFEP and the Institute for Human Resource Professionals, IHRP. The Human Capital Partnership HCP program is a tripartite initiative launched in 2017 to bring together a community of employers who are committed to growing their businesses and staying competitive by having progressive employment practices and developing their human capital. The focus on human capital development is essential for Singapore's economy to remain competitive, for businesses to attract and retain talent and grow, as well as for Singaporeans to continue to have better jobs, better salaries, and better careers. As of now, we have close to 600 HC partners and look forward to growing this community of progressive employers. As part of our engagement and research work at TAFEP, we had commissioned Mercer to conduct a study on HC partners to find out the relationship between the maturity of human capital practices and business performance. Last year, we first introduced the key insights with HC partners. The key insights gathered from the research and implementation toolkits will be shared in a three-part webinar series. In August, we held the first of our webinar series, Stepping Up Talent Acquisition. And today, we will be holding the second part of this webinar series titled, Let's Talk About Performance. To kickstart today's session, there will be a sharing by TAFEP on performance management as a business strategy and an introduction to the implementation toolkit for performance management. Besides the sharing by TAFEP, we also have our esteemed HC partners, FedEx and HSBC, who will be sharing with us their practices and principles of performance management processes. Before we begin the program proper, I would like to take us through some house rules. Do note that this webinar session will be recorded. And if you have any questions for the presenters later, do utilize the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. Type in your questions and the speakers will address them as much as they can. And to minimize disruption, participants' videos and microphones will also be disabled. Lastly, if you or your colleagues encounter any technical issue during this webinar, you may contact us at 6302-2782. I repeat, 6302-2782. Or drop us an email at hcpartner@tafep.sg and we will get back to you as soon as we can. Thank you in advance for your understanding and we look forward to your participation. Ladies and gentlemen, now I would like to invite Ms. Cynthia Cheong to kickstart today's webinar with her presentation, Performance Management as a Business Strategy. Cynthia is the Deputy Director of Program and Capability Development at TAFEP. She leads the Program and Capability Development team in TAFEP, which designs and develops resources and programs for employers to enhance the implementation and adoption of fair and progressive employment practices to grow the community of exemplary employers. Cynthia, please.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much, Jason, for the introduction. And thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us this morning. And as Jason said, this is part of a series of engagement for us to share the insights that we have gained from research that we conducted together with Mercer. Just to give you some idea of what we talked about during the research. One moment, please. Yeah, we surveyed the HCP partners to understand what their practices were and what their human capital practices were correlated to the business performance. which human capital practices would have the greatest impact on business success as well. We asked these questions to the companies who came on board the survey with us. What drives performance, superior and sustainable business outcomes? Which human capital practice has the greatest impact on business success? And what differentiates HCP partners from non-HCP partners in their practices, or indeed in their approach to human capital? We found that this was one of the key things that made human capital practices very well orchestrated, very well implemented in the HCP companies, because HR function was seen to be commercially astute. And when they are commercially astute, they have led to greater buy-in from the leaders, the senior management, meaning that there is much more commitment and investment in human capital programs because the leadership believed that they could change the way we run our business. Yeah. So the question to ask today really is, how is your performance management doing? Essentially, is your performance management system performing as it should be? Is it meeting the intentions that it was set out to meet in the first place? So let's look at what the human capital companies did. Now, performance management is seen not just as a process, but as a whole company environment to enable your employees to excel and to accomplish the goals, right? Now, you might think that goal clarity is a very strange thing to say, isn't it? Surely we all know what we're doing. Surely we all know what we're working towards, right? But you'd be surprised that if companies don't actually sit and look at this and scrutinize this carefully, you might see that actually divisions and teams might be working at odds, but it's not so obvious from the top. Yeah, so you want to have a look. Companies and teams are to work together and not in competition. So guys, it's not a competition who gets to the finish line first, but we want to get to the finish line as a team collectively. It is also quite surprising that when you don't communicate these goals properly to teams and to individuals, we don't really know what we're working towards, although we kind of know what we're doing. So you just think about this. If we all knew very clearly what we were working towards, would it not be much, much more fruitful for the company? Would you not then be able to get the goals and achieve your business targets in a more constructive and systematic manner? Yeah. For the employees, it's important to help them understand where they stand. People want to know how they're doing. People want to know that they have blind spots, and how you as the supervisors, line managers, and HR, you can help them to do better and indeed contribute more towards the company's goals, right? It's very common to hear feedback such as, well, my boss says I'm doing fine. Yeah, you're doing great. So, okay, so this is how you're ranked. Thanks, and have a good year ahead. But it's not constructive. If you don't take care of performance conversations, people are not going to know really how they're doing, where they're going, and certainly they will not know what to do better in. Yeah. And so it's very important, and which we found out in the HCB companies, that you create the right environment for your employees to grow in. Yeah, you have a culture that consistently engages them, and for the employees, they feel valued, they feel respected, they feel appreciated. They know they're not invisible to you. They know that someone's looking out for them. There is a support system for them as well. So actually, when we talk about performance management, really, we're not just talking about the flurry of year-end appraisals. Once a year, we're just going to get this appraisal done because HR is going to send me a reminder if I don't get it done. It's really not just that. It's far more meaningful, intentional, and deliberate than a once a year event like completing your formal performance appraisals. So HCP partners really demonstrated these two strengths. Yeah, first, they have very good people-centric practices. Now, you will hear from our partners later, HSBC and FedEx, how they have grown and created excellent practices for the companies to excel. HCP companies also have very strong performance-driven systems and pay for performance culture, so that everybody knows really clarity about goals and clarity about rewards. So in other words, I know what's in it for me. Now, what could be more motivating than knowing that my efforts, the way I produce results, is going to contribute to the goals of the company and therefore also result in a personal gain in reward and recognition for me. Yeah. Very importantly, there is a joint effort between setting goals between the employees and the managers to ensure alignment with the corporate goals. So we've encapsulated all these learning points from the survey into a toolkit, which I will share with you in just a bit. And you can also download this later from our website. Yeah. There are 4 things that we just wanted to set this out. Now, many of you here today are at various stages of in your performance management journeys in your own company. Some are very sophisticated. Some are starting out. Some are thinking about, okay, maybe it's a chance to enhance, it's a chance to review what you want to do. So we hope that you use this tool guide just as a guide, just as an accompaniment on your journey towards better performance management in your company. So let's just look at what this is. Yeah. HR, you do have a very strategic role to play when your company is setting goals, because goals are just goals. If we don't have the capabilities, if we don't have the skills or the mindset or the culture, we may never get there, or we will muddle through, we'll get there eventually. But if you are more systematic, you are supportive of your company, and you put a lot of programs in place for the company, we'll get there faster, we'll get there sooner, and we'll get there better, right? And why wouldn't we want to do that, right? So it's important for HR to see and support the company in how they are going to run or how they're going to meet their goals. We said this already, cascade and communicate the goals so that everybody is tuned in. As one of the leaders that we met shared with us, if teams optimize sub-goals, meaning lower level goals at the team level or at divisional level, you're going to sacrifice the big company goal at the end of the day, because that will not be optimized. So the real aim of the game is really to optimize the company goals, and that alignment is very important all the way from the CEO to the junior executives. And here is where we really want to focus on as well. Managing performance, your managers, your supervisors are the important links. If they don't do well, chances are we're not going to get the results that we want. So equip them well. Remember that at the end of the day, the performance management is actually a relationship between your reporting managers and the people that they supervise. And if this relationship works well, it is much easier to give feedback. It is much easier to have a dialogue with them, and it is much easier to keep in touch with them. So your managers must also, very importantly, understand what this whole system is about. I was quite surprised when I heard very recently about feedback from the reporting officers from some other companies. And they said, you know, my reporting officer is really just quite interested in completing the online form. We've never had a conversation about my performance. And so I have no idea where I'm going. So if your managers treat the entire performance management system as a paper exercise, then we have forgotten the very important stakeholder in this entire exercise. That performance management is really about the performers in your company. If you don't think about them, if you don't nurture them, if you don't build them, and if we all see this as a very inconvenient, tedious exercise, we are really not going to maximize the results that we could have if we took a little bit more trouble to understand the system as line managers, and then to be trained to deliver and speak and dialogue with our employees, either one-to-one on a team basis, or essentially at the end of every assignment, do we give them feedback on how they've done, right? So here it's very important that your managers understand how rewards are dished out, how your whole reward system works. If they don't understand that, it's also very hard for them to coach your employees, yeah? And very important to understand that when you have a good wage system or good reward and recognition structure, in it, you will definitely have people looking at how now do I give results. It's not just about clarity of what I need to do, it's about also how I do it. Once upon a time when I was in HR and we changed the compensation system, suddenly everybody woke up and realized that, oh, if I actually change the way I performed, my compensation will look quite different. And then they were now asking the managers, so if you say that I'm a C plus now, well, okay, that's not terribly bad, really, but I'm more average, right? How do I get to be a B? So these questions were starting to come up because people were now more aware of their behavior, more aware that they can be in control of how they can deliver results better. So if you align your managers to what you're doing as a compensation system, as a strong pay for performance culture, and with your employees at the heart of all this, you're going to get a lot more alignment and therefore better results as well. Eventually, we can't run away from this. We have to put that grade, do that assessment. But let me tell you this, that point of assessment is not a one-day decision. We do not really speak to our employees on the day that we're doing the appraisal and say, well, I'm sorry, I don't think you've done very well this year. So you know what, you're a D and you better buck up because you're not doing well. I think that honestly, that the evaluation is not a one-day event, but it is a culmination of a whole year or even more than 1 year if you've been with the same team for a while. It's a culmination of many little touch points that tell the employee that you're doing well, you're not doing so well, there are some things that you can do better, there's some things you can do differently. Let's talk about those things. Every opportunity that you get to connect with your people, remember, it is a relationship after all. Every opportunity is a stay conversation, meaning that it builds into retention. It builds into a motivating, it builds into a motivation for people to stay. It incentivizes people to do better. And if we don't take the trouble to have that little conversation many times over the course of the year, it doesn't have to be very long. It doesn't have to be 2 hours each time. But if you don't take the trouble to do that, we really are working in a vacuum, and we really are forgetting that at the end of the day, the very people that we know will carry the business forward is the people that we've neglected to speak with, right? Yeah, so at the end of the day, the evaluation really is the result of many conversations, it's the result of many opportunities for people to do better. If I could just share something with you, there are feedback from people, from members of the public who say, I was terminated suddenly, and the reason given to me was you're terminated on poor performance. But to be fair, I've never been told that I was a poor performer. Now, what has happened in this conversation, I hope this never takes place in your company, is that we have robbed this person of a chance to thrive. We have robbed the person of a chance to grow and to improve, really, even if the person is truly not a good performer. And if you think about it, if we have many more employees, and we do, if everyone doesn't get that chance to grow, you are really not maximizing the talent that you actually have. Yeah. So what is really important is that you do want to align your culture, your values, and your systems for improved performance. You want to establish collective objectives, not just team-based objectives, but what is important as a company for us to achieve. HR, you want to come up with a comprehensive plan that supports the company in getting to achieve goals, as well as to help the employees achieve the best that they can for you as a company. Yeah. Implement a clear reward and recognition system that people can relate to as well, and they can understand. Eventually, what really makes you glue all this together is your organizational culture, how managers can support your employees, and how you can build an environment that is rich in learning through feedback, through many development opportunities. Don't miss those opportunities that you can get to actually work with your employees and build a good relationship with your employees. I can't say enough about this. Once you get your organization culture values right, even if you change the actual nuts and bolts or the mechanics of how you do the actual performance appraisal, it wouldn't matter because your values are already set in your foundation. Yeah. So in conclusion, we can achieve a lot more outcomes with if our performance management is far more effective. You link it clearly from rewards to goals. You engage your talent more broadly, more frequently. And remember, your performance management is not about last year's work, how you've done last year, but it's a springboard to bringing your talent into the future, because that's what we want. We want to build the company. We want to sustain our talent. We want to have good retention and good productivity and business gains. And we want to build that bigger pie for everyone to share. Yeah. This is what the toolkit really looks like. Not like that page, but there are many pages for you to browse. And this sort of takes you through different areas and different stages of implementation. So download this toolkit, scan the code, and you're ready to start reviewing your performance management system, or to actually, I hope we've left you with some good ideas about how to bring this forward. So remember, the question to ask is your performance management system performing the way you want it to? Is it giving you the results it is intended to? And have you remembered the very people that you are supposed to nurture in this entire system, your employees? And with that, I have finished and come to the end of my presentation. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Cynthia, for the interesting insights. Ladies and gentlemen, if you would like to find out more about the implementation toolkit on performance management, we'll be emailing you the materials. So at the end of this session, we will also be seeking your feedback in the online form where you can indicate your email addresses, and we will send the materials over to you. Now, I would like to invite our HC partner, Mr. Eric Tan, Managing Director of FedEx Express Singapore, to share with us FedEx performance management processes. Eric holds leadership of driving the Singapore business and is accountable for directing and coordinating the end-to-end operational activities, corporate strategies, and the overall growth and profitability for Singapore. His responsibility also extends to managing the South Pacific regional hub operations in Singapore. Eric, please.
Thank you, Jason. Good morning, distinguished guests, Cynthia Cheong, Vishesh Bimbri, Zarina Piperdi, Jude Tan, and to all who are here with us today. My name is Eric Tan, and I'm the Managing Director of FedEx Express Singapore. Now, before I start, I would like to thank TAFEP for inviting FedEx to participate in this webinar to share about our performance management program. This is a topic that is very close to my heart, and I am both excited and honored to be part of this event. To begin, I would like to share more about the background of FedEx Express. We are one of the world's largest express transportation companies that provides fast and reliable delivery to over 220 countries and territories. FedEx Express uses a global air and ground network to speed up delivery of time-sensitive shipments by a definite time and date with money-back guarantee. Our FedEx South Pacific Regional Hub is strategically located within Changi Airport's Free Trade Zone and beside the Airport Logistics Park of Singapore. It is also the only hub in Singapore to house a special on-site facilitation of cargo shipment clearance by the Immigration and Checkpoints Authority and Singapore Customs, which translates into faster, more convenient customs clearance for our customers. Our integrated facility is the regional consolidation point for transshipments in and out of Australia and New Zealand and our neighboring Southeast Asia countries. We command a local workforce boasting above 1,200 employees with an extensive vehicle fleet above 150 vehicles that enables us to deliver essential services to our customers. As a people company, FedEx strives to continuously improve its performance management processes to drive individual, team, and organizational performance. To achieve this, we assume a holistic approach towards performance management and employee experience. With a continuous improvement mindset, FedEx across Asia Pacific proactively anticipated both process and technological enhancements that enabled us to successfully transition into a new performance management process in fiscal year 20. Now, let me share more about this to put things into better perspective. Prior to the transition and enhancement, we adopted a conventional performance appraisal system that utilized a comparative 10-point rating scale that leveraged on the bell curve methodology, something which I believe all the audience here are pretty familiar with. The enhanced performance review structure, however, focus on the work that employees have accomplished in terms of goal setting and how it is achieved in terms of individual competencies. It is designed to provide an in-depth understanding of what success looks like for the employee. It also adopts an absolute rating scale to evaluate employee performance based on the ratings of exceeded expectations, met expectations, and did not meet expectations. When I mention about competencies, this refers to the observable behaviors that an employee exhibits in his or her role when applying his or her knowledge, skill sets, and abilities. To ensure that the competencies are applicable to the job roles of our employees, varying competency models for frontline employees, professionals, and managers have been built for their individual success. To illustrate, our frontline employees are customer-centric and team-focused. Hence, the focus for them here is to adapt to changes and communicate well to both internal and external customers. Whereas for our professionals, having a business thinking mindset is imperative. So they need to build on their analytical skills and make timely decisions and recommendations. As for our managers, it is critical for them to be equipped with the ability to lead, influence, inspire, and serve, as well as cultivate exceptional team performance while ensuring that their employees are valued and empowered in their day-to-day duties. There were several key considerations that led us to make this change. And one of the main reasons was to instill a growth mindset by encouraging our employees to focus on future performance as opposed to reflecting on past performances. We also want to simplify the rating scale, as the previous comparative 10-point rating scale mentioned in the previous slide may create confusion to employees, as it begs the questions of whether they need to improve their future performance when they receive an average rating in comparison to fellow team members who receive performance ratings above expectations. Last but not least, the classic comparative rating scale may be perceived by some as demotivating and could potentially discourage collaboration, which could negatively impact our business performance. We want to avoid building a workplace environment where employees feel demotivated when their rating scores are lower than that of their peers. These are all part of our concerted efforts to sustain a workplace culture where our people stand at the cornerstone of our corporate philosophy. Change management is a collective approach for us to prepare and support our employees in dealing with the transformation. So it is important for us to manage the transition well from start to finish. Apart from working closely with key stakeholders, including but not limited to HR and senior management teams, we also ensure that management is well supported in performance, development, and management skill sets through avid training programs. This encompasses effecting a mindset change by shifting from system-related work to providing resources and tools for managers to empower them to conduct effective and meaningful performance and development conversations, build manager-employee relationship, and consistently engage their team members by leveraging on coaching and feedback skill sets. Employee engagement is paramount, and it is centered on fostering genuine commitment while recognizing the value in supporting our employees in their learning journey as they develop and grow professionally. This would in turn translate into higher levels of discretionary effort by our team members. In essence, building a performance-based work culture not only serves to boost employee morale, productivity, and performance, but also prepares the company for strategic workforce planning. It is especially pivotal for us as industry leaders to look at a blend of individual and organizational components to instill a growth culture for our people to be successful. I have come to the end of my presentation. Thank you for your time this morning, and I hope that the sharing was insightful. Back to you, Jason.
Thank you, Eric, for the inspiring stories from FedEx Express Singapore. Next up, we have Mr. Vishesh Bimbri, who is lead HR consulting in HSBC, our HCP partner, to share with us their practices in HSBC's performance management. Vishesh is an experienced HR professional with multi-industry, geography, and specialty experience. He currently works with HSBC Singapore as lead HR consulting. He has worked in different cultural environments and markets across banking, insurance, FMCG, and the automotive sector. Driven by strong work ethics, Vishesh specializes in HR business partnering, HR consulting, culture and change management, performance and leadership coaching. Vishesh, please.
Thanks a lot, Jason, for the introduction. Very good morning to everybody. You know what? Thank you very much for everybody for taking time on this Friday morning. Hope we are able to provide you some good learning. Let me share my slides with you. Just give me a moment. Are my slides visible to everyone?
Yes, Vishesh.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Jason. So first of all, thanks a lot to TAFEP for inviting HSBC to share its performance management philosophy. How do we drive it? And over the course of next 10 to 12 minutes, I would share with you what we are trying to do in HSBC and how do we view the whole performance management and how we are trying to build the culture around it. So just a little bit on HSBC Singapore. So HSBC Group, as of you know, is a leading financial institution. Our relationship with Singapore really is over 140 years old. We operate a full bank here, right? Serving the needs of the multinational corporations, homegrown businesses, private banking. We have a retail network. Many of you would have seen our Jade and Premier Centers, which is in Jewel Changi. We were for 140 years, we were in the Collier Quay, and now we have just shifted our headquarters to the Marina Bay Financial Center. Today, the topic that is there on the performance management, and I thought, let me quote our group chief executive and what we as a bank are trying to do. So overall, we are focused on improving our service to the customers, what kind of returns we are giving to investors. But the very important thing, which really resonates with today's topic, performance management, is what kind of an experience we are trying to give to our people. And as an employee, everybody expects that, how they're rewarded, what is the recognition, how they assess what kind of career progression, growth opportunities, well-being, and that really sets the tone from the top. And it becomes a part of the culture when we talk it. And it's a very important part of the core of the business that you are trying to do. A little bit on up. Cynthia talked about values. How does the business objectives basically tie in with our people, and how do people really feel that whatever they are trying to do is really linked to the overall business objectives? HSBC is a leading financial institution. It's an international bank which serves across continents, across markets. And we really proud ourselves and what we are as of now helping and being the bridges, opening up the world of opportunity. So we, by being operating in whether it's a market, whether it's a region, or whether it's a global operations, you see different opportunities. How do you help your clients, communities to be that bridge where opportunities could be really provided to them, and you become a bridge where the global trade, economy, and the prosperity really continues. And how do we do it? And this comes to our people, the values. And we have recently refreshed our purpose and values, which we call it. When you operate really as a global bank, as a global organization, it's very important that you are able to appreciate the differences. And our first value, which we really, all these 4 tenets actually go in our performance management culture also, because we have got something called values and behaviors assessment also for all our people, including with the performance. The first and foremost is, how do we value difference? Are we all able to appreciate the difference in each other? We are able to really work together. And it's all about being inclusive in our behavior. Everybody feels that they are able to perform at their full potential. And whether you do it with clients, whether you do it with communities, whether you do it with your employees. So how do we live up to this in our day-to-day work? Second, I would say very important values for us is we succeed together. So it's not about individual flashes of brilliance. It's all about teamwork. It's all about collaboration. Are we achieving as a team what we intend to achieve? At the same time, help every individual to perform up to their potential. Third thing, we really pride ourselves when we say we take responsibility. If we say something, whatever is the outcome, we really own it and we take responsibility. And this comes also in the performance management, whether it comes to the employees or it comes to the managers, that the performance management is just not a process or something of a deadline oriented thing, but completely owned and responsibility, or whether it's to the net zero commitments that the bank is trying to do. And last but not the least is, it's not only about talking, but when you say something, you get it done and you get it right. And this is the recent one of the values that we have really pride ourselves as. It's not only about talk, but really getting it done and achieving those things which is there. All these 4 tenets go in the performance management. With this, I'll just try to go in the performance management topic that is there, which is there. So from a HSBC perspective, if I have to talk about, we are talking about driving a sustainable long-term performance. Cynthia also talked about it. It's not about the past 6 months or 12 months, but how do you help people to really thrive, at the same time review, but a future-looking, performance, and help people to really perform at their potential, which is aligned to the values of the organization. how people are doing it. So this basically chart actually tells you how the process looks like. It's not an annual affair. The most important thing is at the beginning of the year, what kind of a contracting is happening between the employee and the people manager. And it's two-way dialogue. It's not that somebody sends you a sheet and says, this is what you're supposed to do. Obviously, some elements of business goals and all are there, but then getting it, what does it mean to an employee, having a two-way conversations, what are the personal goals in that, how will that be achieved, and trying to agree and also agree on what are the development areas when it comes to the personal goals on that. So goal setting is basically setting the transparency, allowing every employee to know what is expected out of them. At the same time, we do recognize that this is a very dynamic world. It changes every 3 months. This is an open process. Goal setting starts, but it can happen, and you can tweak in basis how the the developments are happening over the period of time. Second, to the heart of the performance management, which we really have tried to adopt over the past couple of years, is everyday performance and development conversations. So really trying to stay away from the making it an annual event which is focused on a day or a week at the end of the year, but making it more open and frequent. And I'll talk a little bit in details in the subsequent slides on it. It's basically a holistic feedback which is focused both on performance and behaviors, about strengths, well-being, how things are going on, what is the development activity. And once you come at the year-end activity, which is typically this time of the year, is you start with self-assessment. So you look at what you were supposed to do, how each and every time you have had those conversations over the year, so there is no surprise element. And then the employee does self-assessment, then there's a manager assessment, there's an overall fairness review. I'll talk a little bit about the fairness review, which is how do you remove bias, not try to force fit people, have a very holistic, and not only the manager decides everything, but it's more than that, the 360-degree stakeholders coming together and seeing that, is it right, is just, is it fair? And then how do you give feedback? So that's how broadly the process looks for us in the bank. And I'll just try to get deep dive a little bit on the everyday performance and development conversation. So when we look at this whole performance management, especially in the current scenario, which we all have been for the last, if you look at last 20 months, we all have been in hybrid. It has been mostly home working. Employees have not seen the manager. The managers have not seen the employee, barring those agenda-based meetings. People are missing that face-to-face interaction. In this time, people have their own personal challenges. So we have really tried to focus on 3 things, which is everyday performance. How do you digitally enable people to make sure that the performance is recorded, those conversations, those achievements, those development. And third is the people manager capability, because I think the people manager has become more important in this hybrid working where there are no colleagues who are available in the workplace, and how do you support that bit on the part. So talking about everyday performance, the principles are very simple. There is no frequency, but the whole concept is that you are expected to have frequent conversations which are supporting performance, development, and well-being. We don't structure it, but we say, it needs to be owned both by the manager and the employee. You need to keep it simple, talk about it. It's a two-way feedback. It's not only the manager saying, but also the employee saying, this is how things are going in, what does suppose needed, do we need any tweaking in the objectives, how things are being prioritized, reprioritized, and the most important is, are you recording it? Because there should be no performance, surprise at the end of the year, how things are going. We have seen that what it helps is it's a holistic conversation. So, when opportunities come, what are people trying to do over their career in 2-3 years? Is the work really helping in them? Are they able to perform at their productivity level? With pandemic, there has been a huge challenge for people. We all have different resources when we are working from home. Is the manager able to understand those challenges? What kind of support is to be provided? There are mental health issues. There are various well-being things. So how does that conversation, I think those frequent conversations really help on the overall things. And secondly, the managers. I think the managers have a much heightened role. They are under much more demand at this point of time. So this is just a pictorial way. How does this everyday performance look like? So you set objectives. You also set development objectives. You keep on reviewing and updating. We strongly encourage feedback, and we have got tools to do it. So it's not only the employee or the manager giving feedback to each other, but it's also the three stakeholders. You can seek feedback. How's the development plan basically progressing around it? Are you talking about strengths, performance contribution? What are the ways of working? What could be done differently? What you want to reprioritize, prioritize, as I said, which really helps as you get into this part of the year where you formally, get into that assessment stage. So that's a continuous journey, and it's a continual dialogue the way it looks like. Last bit on the everyday performance is when I think Cynthia spoke about this. Though it's a review, it's for a period of last 10 months, 11 months. At the same time, it's very important that it's future focused. At the end of the day, the purpose of the performance management is to help people, give their best, whatever the potential they are able to really perform at their potential. Hence, it's all about future, how they can do better, what better support can be provided by organization, by manager, and how they will do better next year. So ideally, we try to have a very equal contribution and getting people that, feedback around the stakeholders and seeing what better they can do next year. So not try to be too backward looking, but try to be future forward and helping all about future, that how do they, do better next year and achieve their career ambitions. So that's how the focus is on the overall feedback mechanism. Last bit I talked about fairness reviews. So I saw some questions which were coming earlier on the ratings and distribution and force fitting of the bell curve and all. We basically call it fairness reviews, and it's not about force fitting the rating, but it's not only manager who's deciding what rating to be given to remove their bias about the manager. Then, is there a conversation happening between the important stakeholders to ensure that it's a fair assessment, it's accurate, it's free from bias. There's a view from the stakeholders. It's not only about top performers, but also about the bottom. Is there a bias? How do you improve upon them and have it look at a 360-degree perspective? Second pillar for us in the performance management, especially in this hybrid working, which we have introduced this year, is we have given an additional tool to our managers, which is their digital environment. This is the first year where we can create and track activities on our performance. If I'm an employee, I can record my achievements, I can seek feedback. Same thing, the manager can do it. You can seek feedback. So able to do it. It's basically a digital tool enablement. When we all are working, people have limited time. They don't want to be sitting in front of a computer every time. But you help your stakeholders, your employees, your people to really have a digital enablement around the mobile. So it's one of the tools which really helps and makes it easy. Performance on the go kind of a thing. It's really first year, and we are hoping that our people can have a better experience and they don't have to really save their productive hours around this. The last bit which I wanted to talk about from a HSBC perspective is our experience of the hybrid has been that the feedback that we get from our employees is that they really miss the workplace. Unfortunately, due to pandemic, we all have been in this state, but people also like the hybrid working, and that's a future. So how do you link the performance management in the future of work? And one of the key areas that we are focusing and will continue to focus as we go in 2022 would be how do we equip our people managers from whom the demands have really increased apart from their day-to-day job, where they have to make extra effort to lead people with empathy. And not have a recency effect when they are seeing employee only from a window of a computer. The organization is really becoming the screen for people, and people are not able to go offices, or they will go in a limited manner 1 or 2 days in future. Is how do we invest? What are we doing to uplift our people manager capabilities? So we drive a lot of program educating our managers on telling what they could do differently, how they can help and support their employees. And that's the key thing, which really would be a key focus for us. So with this, I really come to the end of my sharing. Hope it was meaningful. Over to you, Jason. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Vishesh, for the great sharing. So ladies and gentlemen, we hope that the sharing by our two HC partners, FedEx and HSBC, have provided you with valuable insights. So to top it off, we shall now proceed to the next segment on the panel discussion, Driving a Sustainable Performance-Based Culture. Our first panelist is from 8LIS Consultancy Services, Ms. Zarina Pipradi, Managing Director. With 35 years of experience in the airline and aerospace industry, Zarina has deep and broad experience in human capital strategy formulation, talent management, workforce planning, industrial relations, and the whole spectrum of HR services. Zarina was also the CHRO for 15 years at SIA Engineering Company Limited, where she oversaw major manpower initiatives for transformation and productivity campaigns. Next, we would like to welcome our speakers back. Ms. Cynthia Cheong from TAFEP, Mr. Eric Tan from FedEx Express Singapore, and Mr. Vishesh Bimbri from HSBC. Last but not least, I would like to introduce our esteemed moderator, Mr. Jude Tan. Jude is a consultant, advisory of Korn Ferry, and has worked with clients on a diverse range of projects encompassing organizational transformation, job redesign, organizational structure, performance management, social rewards, strategic workforce planning, and competency framework design. Jude was also previously in the team for the TAFEP-Mercer research and has a strong understanding of the HC Partners practices. Ladies and gentlemen, we strongly encourage you to join us in this panel discussion by typing your questions in the Q&A box below. We have also received many of your questions on performance management during the registration, and I thank you for that. We seek your understanding that due to time constraints, we might not be able to address all the questions asked, but the panelists will try their best. Without further ado, I'll hand the time over to our moderator, Mr. Jude Tan. Jude, please.
Thank you very much, Jason. And once again, a very good morning to everyone in this Knowledge Series webinar today. I'm honored to be moderating this panel discussion with our distinguished speakers, Cynthia, Eric, Vishesh, and Zarina. And thank you, Vishesh and Eric, for sharing with us your insights on what human capital partner organizations such as HSBC and FedEx are doing. Those are really exemplary practices that your respective organizations are doing to invest in, and especially draw out the best of your people. You know, before I begin, I just want to share with everyone that I have a 7-year-old daughter. So I apologize in advance if you hear her cries or any cries in the background. She's training to be an opera singer, you see, so no amount of doors or walls can effectively block out her cries and her lovely notes. So she's my new boss, talking about performance management. So she's managing my performance instead of me managing hers. So I appreciate everyone's kind understanding on that. Thank you very much. So without further ado, let us kick off this panel discussion. Vishesh, you're sharing on building a performance-driven culture that's taken on a long-term perspective rather than focusing on short-term results. It really struck me. And Eric, it's inspiring that leadership in FedEx is highly invested in performance management, and it permeates throughout the organization down to the line managers, and you're moving away from a 10-point rating scale. So as we found out through the TAFEP research study as well, a key success factor of the performance management process is how well managers are trained to conduct performance conversations and coach their direct reports. So let's talk about performance today. Interestingly enough, back in the 1980s, performance management was introduced as a means to manage our underperformers as part of a forced distribution curve that was popularized by a very successful organization back then, and we all know it, General Electric. So thankfully that has evolved over time, and organizations no longer focus on using performance management as a tool to shave off underperformers, but to bring out the best of its people. Organizations have come a long way since the 1980s, but there's still some ways to go. In organizations that I worked with, many of them share with me that they are encumbered by the PM process, a lot of 360s, multiple calibration rounds, documentation, etc. And for the managers on the ground, they have their day-to-day work and they have to do this as well. So they think of this as an extra CCA of sorts. And it's all a laborious paper exercise just to justify a ranking that they might already have in their head. So the year end coming, I think it's a very timely time to talk about this. And the PM process, for our participants and audience here in the webinar today, I guess it's very timely to think about how can we, as a HR and leadership community, draw out the best of the PM processes in our organization. So now I'd like to turn to our speakers to share with us their insights and practices in their organizations. Vishesh, perhaps if I could start with you in HSBC. The question is, how does it help to have a vision for long-term development in performance management? And how do you empower managers in creating that great culture for performance within your organization? Vishesh, please.
Yep. Thanks a lot, Jason. And I think you're bang on that. If you look at the time of management time, the manager time that is invested in doing the performance management doesn't become a paper. So as you know, what we try to do is, if you have done well on the conversations throughout the year, if you have invested enough, believe me, this could be a 1 hour kind of a conversation for which there is no surprise and you're focused on developing things. So for us, it's sitting, I think, sitting outside also. How do you make manager as a coach? How do you help manager to be a holistic? So manager is like a superhuman being currently who's expected to manage the well-being, provide all the support, at the same time be accountable for the performance and the KPIs, which are the hard KPIs. So to me, the people manager is the key person in delivering your people experience, and we try to do a lot of investment and making sure that they are more like leaders, coaches, and it's like a 12 months affair. At the same time, with pandemic, they are hugely challenged because they have a limited visibility of people. So how do you support them in this hybrid working, future of working? How are you enabling them to see and develop what kind of support the organizations can provide? So we try to spend a lot of time on our people managers, at the same time giving them empowerment, and what kind of support are they skip level giving, which is over above them. So as a HR function, as a leadership team, listening to them, giving them the empowerment, because they are basically the key people who spend whatever daytime or a yearly time with their employees. So that's how we try to do, and we invest a lot of efforts, whether it's training them, supporting them, whatever we can do on that.
Thank you so much, Vishesh. And I hear from you, HR is both an enabling function as well as a supporting function to the managers on the ground and on the line. So if I can now turn then to Eric, as an MD and business leader of FedEx, how would you describe the culture in FedEx, and how would you empower your people leaders, right, from the business management perspective and line managers to ensure that they are aligned to your vision and direction for the organization?
Hey, thank you, Jude. FedEx advocates a culture of continued engagement and transparency, where we establish a workplace environment with open communications and trust. This essentially allows us, our employees, to understand the big picture and the part that they play in the success of the entire organization. In fact, this culture forms part of our DNA, whereby every manager is essentially his or her own HR manager for their teams. And what this entails is that they are fully empowered with the autonomy and support to oversee and to lead the full HR spectrum by managing the onboarding, recruitment, training, performance management, as well as disciplinary actions of their team members. Yeah, essentially the full suite of a HR spectrum. Now, every employee is also given a chance to pursue their dream in FedEx, and support is always readily available to help them to maximize their potential through training and development platforms accessible to all. Line managers also regularly engage their employees in one-on-one conversations beyond the yearly performance appraisal conversations. And as what Cynthia and Vishesh alluded to earlier, right? It is not a once a year conversation, and during the performance review conversation, the employee should not receive any surprises, right? We also have formal open door processes as part of our people philosophy, whereby this encourages employees to communicate their ideas and concerns directly to management. Other regular communication platforms that enable employees to have macro understanding of the role that they play that contributes to the business environment include daily pre-work briefings and regular work group meetings, and even town hall sessions that are organized on a regular basis.
Thank you very much, Eric. And if I can distill what you have shared, it's about two key things here. It's about ownership as well as what's the last? I just lost that. But I think it's really about that ownership and empowerment. Yes, that's the thing I'm thinking about.
Absolutely.
Right, yeah, and how leadership actually drives that, right? Because leadership needs to take the charge, and managers on the line. It's not parking it, and throwing it to HR. Okay, PM process is a HR job, but managers taking it on, taking the ownership, driving it as if they own the business as well, amongst their own teams. So that's really great. If I could now move on to Zarina, you have a wealth of experience both in-house and in consulting. Based on your experience, what's it like when managers really actually embrace that importance of performance management and take it in their stride to manage difficult conversations as well as key things, especially during the current pandemic?
Thanks, Jude. I guess if managers do performance management well, it makes a whole world of difference for the employees. Because really what employees are looking for when they join organizations, and more surveys are telling us that of why people stay, why people leave, is because of their supervisors, largely, right? So if managers can take this to heart and understand that what they say, how they treat their employees, how they guide their employees to do a better job every day, it makes a world of difference for them. So really what is important is conversations. It is important to have proper conversations with the employees promptly, as well as in a way that tells them what it is that they need to do better, rather than to dwell on the past and say you didn't do well. But what is important is the guidance on how do you guide this employee to do better for the future, because it is all about having that longer term view, right? Why do we even do performance management? It is to be able for the employee to do better in the future, right? And to do better means to be placed on a better career track so that the employee can grow within the organization. And why is it important for the managers then? It is for him, if he can guide all of his employees to do better, then his own unit will do much better. And collectively, if all managers can do this better and take it to heart, then the company would be able to do a lot better, right? So I think as what Eric has said, what Vishesh has said, what Cynthia has touched on, the important denominator here in performance management and how successfully companies can do it is the manager. Part and parcel of the manager's job. It is a key aspect of the manager's job, and it's not, what I call a side effect of being a manager. He has to take it to heart. It is not HR's role, it is his role to do this.
I see Eric nodding very furiously as well in agreement. Thank you so much, Zarina. And I really love what you mentioned about it having be a regular conversation. Just reflecting on it on my daughter, she tells me every day, if I don't feed her on time, she'll go, and then she starts crying. So we always get feedback in one way or the other, whether is it verbal or non-verbal cues as well. It is what I'm hearing from you is it's crucial that managers take it in their stride and put it in a mindset of their own, that it is their job, their duty, and their responsibility to take those cues, verbal and non-verbal, from their subordinates to manage their performance. So thank you so much for that. And now turning to Cynthia, your work with human capital partners such as HSBC, FedEx today with us, and the insights that you have obtained through the research study, which has engaged, if I'm correct, close to 100 human capital partners organizations. What do they do that strikes you as progressive, that sets them apart from other non-human capital partner organizations?
Thanks, Jude. I think as the research showed, right, I think they get the foundation right first. So once your foundation is right, which means that there's alignment between culture, the values, and really where we really want to take the company to. Now, when we say where we want to take the company to, we don't just mean we are talking about greater profits, or we're talking about financial gains, but really how does the company want to sort of position itself for the future? Does it mean that we need to grow the company in terms of certain set of skills? Do we need to, for example, in the last few years, because of the disruptions, the technology disruptions that we've all gone through, companies then just scrambled to say, oh, okay, we maybe need to put a computer literacy program in place, right? So that our guys can actually keep up with the changes. So I think one of the things that HR leaders in the HCP companies have done well is they actually also try to see how they support the company, build the foundation for the company. So if it means that we all need to learn together, we will learn together, but there's always that support for them to help them learn and launch them into the future. One of the things we think is also very exemplary of the HCP companies is that nobody gets left behind. It's very easy to just say, well, you're not with us, you're not getting your results, so we don't want you in the team. But it's more than that. As you said in the beginning, HCP companies actually help people to move with them so that really at the end of the day, nobody gets left behind. And I think that's how they value talent. Back to you, Jude.
Thank you very much, Cynthia. Talking about performance management, like you mentioned today, is really timely given the COVID pandemic situation that we're currently in. In many of such organizations, financial results have been adversely impacted and affected. And to just achieve that same result, employees have to work harder, maybe 2 to 3 times more, even beyond, right? Just to get that same results as pre-COVID years. There's also an additional toll of employees, especially for the frontline staff. I'm not sure for Vishesh, in terms of the banking industry, people, and especially areas like FedEx and logistics, you need to be at the front line and you have to deal with additional physical as well as psychological stresses. With the virtual work from home arrangements as well, there's also an increased difficulty for managers to actually observe, assess, and manage performance of their subordinates. So maybe just turning to our 2 human capital experts here, right? Starting with Vishesh. Was it tough for managers in HSBC to manage and assess performance with all the work from home arrangements? And how did HSBC do that to address the difficulties of assessing and managing performance?
Yeah, thanks. And I think it's really a good question. Honestly, yes. And one set of feedback that you get from the employees where they feel the managers are not able to appreciate their circumstances, the expectations have remained same, and they're challenged, right? Because especially if you see the survey feedback from female employees who have to also manage home at the same time, do both of things. And if you talk about managers, the managers really feel that, there are simple feedback like people not switching on, logging on time or not being on camera and all those things. So I think one of the things which we realized really is from a manager perspective is what we can, and we call it future of work kind of work that we did, which we had never thought about before 18 months. And what are the people manager inputs that we need to, so how do you lead with empathy, and the everyday performance which is there, it becomes much more important in this kind of time. Because if I'm in an office, I'm a people manager, it's not a lot about that conversation, but I can see people, there are colleagues around it who support our employees. If my mental well-being or mental health is not so good or I'm not a good mood, there are people who can sense those. There's no way of finding that in a Zoom unless and until I'm so sharp on the one-on-one. So we led a lot of both for the employees, the well-being initiatives, for the managers, that how they can support, what kind of additional resources can be deployed, and creating that awareness. And it starts at the top. So what was the tone from the top, right? Let's be honest, last year when we were in the peak of pandemic, a lot of performance objectives were reprioritized. And that's why it's important to understand whatever we said might not be, but what best can be done. And hence it comes to what is achievable, and doing away with, those forced bell curves and all, and appreciating the circumstances. And that has been one of the key initiatives that we look at is, and again, it comes to how do you support the employee, how do you support the people and bring them together, and start to tone from the top. What is the leadership saying? I, as a manager, will see what my manager is doing, and it starts from the CEO, right? So what kind of a culture is being populated?
Thank you so much, Vishesh. What you mentioned about management having to make a decision and call towards reprioritizing certain objectives. Maybe if I could, put in and ask Eric, just turn it a little bit to Eric to ask, as MD, did you have to make those kind of decisions at reassessing certain performance targets of your organization, and what kind of leadership or responsibilities or courage that was required to make that decisions?
Yeah, I think as far as business goes and objectives goes, I think it still pretty much remains intact. But I think I want to take this opportunity to write on what Vishesh shared earlier. I think with these challenges of COVID, right, I think it is extra even more so important, for managers to routinely check in with employees working from home, right? In terms of taking care of their mental well-being. Yeah, and a lot of times, people may assume or think that, hey, working from home is a lot easier, but as a lot of us on the forum now knows, it is not quite the case, right? In fact, it has its own set of challenges, and hence, the point here is that I think as a managers, I think it is extra important now in these circumstances to give extra care to our employees who are working from home.
Thank you, Eric. It's very encouraging to know that organizations are taking an employee-centered approach towards managing performance rather than a financial approach where you look at achieving certain financial targets within the organization, putting the people first. It's really great to hear from you. Now turning to Zarina, in the work with organizations, was it difficult for them to assess and manage performance? When we talk about performance, we can't run away from another very closely related human capital aspect, which is rewards. In terms of driving performance and rewarding performance, which has a very high synergy with each other. So how should organizations therefore reward performance, especially in tough times in the current pandemic where maybe the organizations might not have reached their financial targets?
Good question, Jude. I just want to touch on what Eric just said, employees, managers having challenges during these COVID times, and brings me back to your 7-year-old, right? You're having a challenging time right now. In recognizing performance during COVID, where a lot of the employees are working virtually, there are challenges in measuring what performance levels are already. There are some jobs, there are some roles where it is easier to measure the performance of individuals purely because there are deliverables that they need to deliver on. There are, it could be reports that they need to put up, it could be proposals that they need to put up, it could be sales that they need to conduct, etc. But there are some other roles where it could be a lot harder to measure whether or not an individual is performing or not. And of course, there is also other dimensions that you can quite observe, like what Vishesh mentioned, the how-tos, how people behave in an environment, in an office environment, the engagement with each other, the team dynamics, all of those are more difficult to assess. You can observe those things in a virtual environment. So it makes assessing them therefore a lot more difficult compared to what we used to have in an office environment. By the end of the day, when we know that there has to be rewards related to performance, and the fact that many companies are facing distressing times, how do we reward individuals in such times, right? I guess, if the company is not so financially strapped, they could be able to still give a decent way of rewarding for performance. But compared to good times, of course, it has to be a little bit more tightened in the way that they recognize who ought to be given a better reward versus others. It is a question of how much expenditure they can afford based on the cash flows that they're generating. But still, you do need to motivate your good performers, right? And you do need to set aside some rewards to say that, hey, you're doing well, and I can't give you that much in this year, but this is what we think we can afford during these bad times. Now, this is, of course, from a cash flow point of view, that's what can be done. But there can be many non-cash rewards that can also be accorded to individuals to continue to motivate them during this bad time, right? Even a pat on the back, a virtual pat, if it's not a physical pat on the back, but or you could have best employee awards, or you could have stars. You could introduce peer engagement and peer recognition kind of programs and campaigns. You could have give them some free classes on exercise, on yoga. You sign up for them. There can be many different ways of showing the employees that I understand these are bad times, but I do want to tell you that you're doing a good job and that, hang in there and we'll get out of this together.
Thank you so much, Serena. And reflecting about it myself, and I'm not sure whether it's reflected or it echoes with the audience here today as well. Sometimes it's not about the money, actually. It's really about the bosses giving due recognition in a way that is genuine, not just lip service. Oh, good job, pat on back, but really genuine, understanding the struggles the employees and managers saying that, hey, I'm in this with you, right? I'm not sitting on an ivory tower and just managing, like playing a puppeteer and managing performance of my subordinates along the way. But in this with you, I'm also impacted. I'm going to walk the ground with you. I'm going to ride this through with you, and I recognize you. I think that is something that you have really, really said and resonated with me. And sometimes, personally, I admit, I raise my hand. I yearn that. I yearn that from my bosses to just say, it's not about giving me a really good pay raise or, okay, who doesn't want money, right? So, I mean, of course, if that could come, that would be double bonus. But in certain situations, employees also understand it might be tougher for the organization. So it's really about being family in that sense, right? Like, we are all in this together. I think that's the crux for it. Yeah. So thank you so much for sharing that with us, Serena. And if you could just stick with you, in my opening statement, I talked about how organizations have evolved, right, from the 1980s. But there's some still organizations that are still kind of stuck in the very administrative, process-driven. And because there's a system in place, the system drives that behavior. And sometimes that system drives undesirable behavior because I just need to put a tick in the bucket. It's just part of the process. It's an administrative ordeal that I just to wade it through. And so these processes take out the human aspects of it. And what's left is just a cold process. It's much really like the GE bell curve model designed to manage out poor performance. It's nothing to do with developing a great performance or performance to thrive within an organization. So some companies today are struggling with it. And I think through the Q&A, I'm receiving certain questions about the bell curve model. And should organizations therefore shift away from it? And what are your advice and views for them?
Okay, that's a difficult one because, the bell curve has been in place in many organizations for a very long time. Yeah. But before I go there, it is, with coming to end of year when people treat this as a paper exercise and becomes a very cold treatment of the employees. Really back to that earlier statement on managers having to take it to heart, right? That this is part and parcel of their job, and they ought to do frequent conversations with their employees rather than at the end of the year to say that, hey, you've done well or you've not done well. It has to be a continuous process throughout the year. And therefore, if managers take it to heart, it would have been done well, and it would also have been documented, because some managers are very good. They engage their employees, they talk to them, they tell them what, and they coach them to tell them that this is the way to do your job, etc., etc. But at the end of the day, what the company also needs, and through HR administration, is documentation of it as well, right? So you do need both. You do need the individual to be good people and managers, but you also need that administrator in them to make sure that there is a documented flow in all of this. Because however well you may engage your employees, there may be points of contention. And they may come back to you and say, or go to your boss and say, no, it wasn't done well, I was not informed. So you need to still have it documented. Now, why then go into all of that? And at the end of the day, there is what we call a forced bell curve. Well, in the first place, it is not a forced bell curve, right? It is something that I would prefer to call moderation, because managers all have different standards, right? So some are more easygoing than others. Some, it's very hard to squeeze that A rating out of them because their standards are so high. So you need to moderate. So you can't have across the company one particular department where everybody is A-rated, and then in another part of the company, everybody is just C's. There's no good performance, So you need a moderation to come in. And you need to kind of balance off the different levels of standards that you are seeing across the organization. And that's where a bell curve comes into play, because you kind of, as you moderate, then you would be able to say, okay, I think we need to have, you know, in that particular department where everybody should see, surely you have some good performance in there. And if you don't, then that doesn't reflect very well on the manager, right? Is he not guiding his people to do better? And in another department where everybody is A, is the manager taking an easy way out? He doesn't want to upset anybody, and everybody is an A. You know, so you need to moderate, and in the process, you also educate your managers that, hey, you do need to be good guy, bad guy. You need to know who are your better performers, because at the end of the day, if you are going to set, let's say, give a 2-month bonus, merit bonus to your good performers, are you going to give it to everybody? Will there be enough budget for your department to be able to do so? You know, you can't, right? Because at the end of the day, if you are going to link rewards to performance, then you do need to have that. And you can call it forced ranking, but actually it's not, it's moderation, so that the standards applied across the whole company. And in the process, you make sure that there's fairness. So Vishesh touched on it. It is about fairness, it's about equity, and you spread it across the company.
Thank you so much, Serena. So yeah, I'm hearing that, you know, unfortunately, organizations have a big spot, right? You cannot run away from that in terms of a budget. And in terms of rewarding, therefore, it needs to be calibrated in a sense, and the word we used was moderation, because you need to ensure fairness and equitability across all employees. And I think one thing that that you shared, right, that we cannot run away from documentation, you know, although it's not the sexy part of management, performance management, but it's all part of the process anyway. And I maybe just want to share with the audience how important this is, because I've been a victim of it, is where I've been pushing for a good close to a year, and then unfortunately my manager got better prospects and my manager left the organization. So my new manager came in and said, "Oh, Jude, I've heard a couple of good things among you from my fellow colleagues, you know, that those people have worked from you, but well, I only saw you for maybe 2 months, so I can't really give you a good rating." And then I left that conversation like that. I was like, because there wasn't any black and white, there wasn't any impetus to refer to anything. So that's why documentation is important. You know, you need to put certain things down black and white, because some people do forget. Even if your manager stays, maybe in a half year, mid-year review, they say a lot of good things, and then at the end of the year, they have a recency effect, right? And it's like, oh, the last 2 weeks or last 2 months, you did something wrong, and they get really centered on that. So it's important to have documentation. So it's not something that we, I guess, as managers can run away from. So I'd just like to now move on to Cynthia, right? How about your own experience with human capital partners in terms of, you know, performance management conversations as well as rewarding performance?
I think that human capital partners, because talent is so important to them, they actually do spend the time to actually nurture them. And I think one very important thing is really coming back to the whole point about performance management. It is not to be confused with performance appraisals. So a performance appraisal is that one act that you do with sitting down and formally recording and documenting and sharing that information or feedback about the person's performance. But really that is not performance management. Performance management is way beyond that, right? And here is where the HCP companies do very well in. They understand the importance of talent. They understand the importance of engaging the talent. And so really, that's why we said just now in this presentation that their practices are people-centric. So we understand it's centered around the people, because we believe that if the people are nurtured and given the environment to thrive in, they will contribute to the business sustainability and success. So yeah, I think that's what we found really very striking in the HCP companies.
Thank you, Cynthia. And now moving on to, you know, Eric, where you shared about FedEx moving away from a 10-point scale. How has that evolved for, you know, FedEx? Is there still like a back-end kind of force ranking model that's being utilized? How is performance being managed within your organization?
Thank you, Jude. I think in my mind, there's no really perfect structure, as every approach comes with its unique pros and cons, right? As with many things in life. So I think it is more important to look at the direction that the organization is headed towards and adapt a model that works best for the employees and the organization at each stage. For example, FedEx used to have a forced distribution, and we have decided to move away from that. A few questions that we ask ourselves: can we really differentiate performance with a 10-point rating scale? And there were occasions whereby managers found it hard to justify performance rating using the previous 10-point rating scale. For example, questions coming from employees would be, hey boss, why am I given a 15? Why am I not a 16? Yeah, for context, FedEx 10-point rating scale is from a score of 11 to 20, as opposed to perhaps your classic ABCDs, right? So, and compared to comparative rating, which may cause confusion to employees, an absolute rating actually makes it easier for employees to understand whether they have met job expectations and achieved the performance standards required for the job. Employees no longer need to question themselves if they really have to improve on their performance when they receive an average rating score, whereas their team members perform beyond expectations and receive a higher rating scores than themselves. FedEx's current performance management structure actually enables employees to focus on the work that they accomplish, i.e. the goals, and how it is being accomplished, i.e. the competencies. And it is designed to provide them with an understanding of what success looks like in their role. And finally, Jude, I also want to add on to the point that Zarina mentioned earlier. I mean, that is so absolutely true, right? I mean, it's about some managers wanting to be to play the nice boss and rate most of their employees with high ratings, but when it comes to the rewards portion of it, they could find themselves in a situation of having insufficient budget to fund for that, because everything goes back to that budget in a way.
Thank you very much, Eric. I like your sharing about how organizations need to evolve their thinking and their performance management process as they evolve in terms of their business. So if, for the audiences that might be in an SME, sometimes a lot of things are very in a constant flux as you continue to looking at driving certain results. Sometimes there might not be an area where you're able to quickly pinpoint, oh, this is the targets I have for the year, because I'm an SME, I'm probably a new startup, the things that evolves over time. So it always is customized to the business context and the operating environment in which the organization works at. If there are targets that are a little bit more stable and predictable, maybe you can do certain things. But if it's not, then sometimes the management of that process might need to differ and take a new shape. So thank you very much for that. Moving on to Vishesh, for HSBC, what does your organization do?
In terms of
the performance bell curve distribution.
So we call it fairness review. We were also, like Eric said, 5 years back, force fitting. Honestly, I would say that the focus is much more on performance differentiation rather than force fitting people. Personally, when we drive those conversations with the leaders, there's no point of having a forced bell curve in a team of 15, 20 people. But if I have a team of 100 people or 500 people, if everybody is rated as a top or everybody is rated as an underperformer, that's what the fairness review is supposed to question, that, do the stakeholders also feel that way? What is the contribution? So the focus is much more not force fitting people into the jacket, but overall looking at, is the performance truly reflected? Is it seen that way by the stakeholders also when you do the performance review? And it's not only about top performers, but also the bottom performers, so that you remove all those biases. And you have to differentiate, right? First of all, performance differentiation, and then it comes to the rewards, which is the pay part of it. Pay is totally, I would say, affordability, as Eric said, budget affordability. It was a yesteryears when you used to link it, but I would say there is they're linked, but they're also de-linked, because like last year, you would like to recognize performance, you would recognize through non-monetary means, but you didn't have the budget so-called to support it. So that's why I think it's a very transformative time currently that is going on, and it's important that you might not have a review, but what kind of experience are you giving people? How recognition is happening in terms of career? What non-monetary means can be used to drive that is also a very key enabler, and that's what we try to do in HSBC.
Thank you very much for sharing, Vishesh. And in my work with organizations, sometimes there is that pot, which is the budget, but there's also a flexible amount within that budget where you empower your managers to make that discretionary flex up or flex down in terms of their teams when rewarding performance. So that's a couple of ways that organizations can look at, being a little bit more creative instead of just following a back-end matrix where if it's like a C performance is definitely 1 month, right? There is some availability to give managers some flex of maybe like 10 to 20% to dial it up or down accordingly, especially when you're trying to manage your own team. So if I could just circle back to Cynthia, for TAFEP in your organization that engages human capital partners as well as non-human capital partners, organizations, employees might feel like, hey, I'm being force-fitted into a distribution curve. I don't think that's fair. How does TAFEP engage organizations that might be doing those kind of practices, and what kind of advice would you have for such leaders?
I think at the end of the day, we mustn't use the force fitting as the gospel truth of performance ranking and rating, right? In the end, we must also have the employers understand very clearly what were the criteria that they used to rate the performance or the performance in their team. Now, here's where I think that as managers, we can have what I'll call a secret list of criteria, meaning what's on paper is what everybody sees on paper. But really, when I finally put the ranking together, it's this secret list that kind of like maybe takes precedence. So you want to, first of all, make sure that your team is fairly measured and they know what they're being measured against, or they know very clearly what competencies you are looking at as well, right? So if a person really gets good ratings, get good results, but sort of destroys everybody in the team, would you still go and would you still recognize him as the best in your bell curve, for example? So you need to be very clear, managers need to be very clear that there are a few things that we look at when we're measuring performance, right? One would be seriously the targets. Secondly, would also be the behaviors and the values. And when this is very clear to employees, when you actually come together, and even if you had to force fit, it is at the end of the day really a calibration, as Zarina said. It's a calibration, it's a moderation. Just because you're 1 or 2 steps lower, it doesn't make you the worst performing staff. It just has done better in the year, for example, right? And therefore, it's always good for the manager to then go back to the employee to say, all right, so maybe this was not as expected, but there are ways that we can improve, and there are things that we need to look out for the following year. Yeah, I think that is normally how we would talk to the employers when it comes to being fair during the performance appraisal system.
Thank you so much, Cynthia. And now we just move on. I think we covered most of our parts, so can we just move on to a couple of Q&A from the audience? Let me just look at a couple of questions that have been written. I think one, maybe I can start with directed to Vishesh in terms of HSBC on the fairness review, right? Is there a more robust approach to compare performance across managers who are performing really different roles? What are the behavior parameters that are being discussed in the fairness reviews? And how could managers ensure that evaluation is fair, since there's the element of working from home?
Yeah. So thanks. So first of all, fairness review, it's not force fitting in a bell curve kind of a thing. It typically will happen at a skip level and across the stakeholders kind of a thing, where the team sizes would be, I would say, quite large kind of a thing. As I said, there's no point in reviewing, and then you look at whether that team is really seen as a top performing team or underperforming team, and those ratings are truly reflective of the contributions that have been made. And then you might deep dive into individuals, not only at the top, but at the bottom also, why that has been done, what are the reasons, so that it's not only the manager or the skip level who have decided, but a stakeholder view can be taken. On the working from home, honestly, everybody has been working from home for 18, 19 months. It has been mostly, a limited finance. So that really sets a state where, except the frontline teams who have been there, but everybody in those teams would be in that circumstances. So that really sets a level playing field around that, I would say. And it's not somebody's to put somebody's rating down or put somebody's rating, but just to say it's beyond that manager and skip level to have an overall view of the team.
Thank you so much, Vishesh. And if I could, looking at Q&A, moving on to Eric in FedEx, when FedEx made that shift from measuring performance, were there any resistance that you encountered or the leadership encountered among the ground managers, supervisors, or even rank and file employees? Were there any specific ways that the leadership and HR engaged and supported them to make that transition?
Thank you, Jude. I think naturally, as with everything else, a lot of times it's very easy for people to fall into, that managing, finding change management difficult. So I think naturally, one of the things that we did obviously was lots of open communications and transparency, and to share with the employees, the reasons and the rationales why the organization is choosing to move away from the traditional bell force rating into something that's what we have now. Yeah, so I think we were very it was pretty well managed, and I think it didn't take a long time for acceptance to kick in. Yeah, and I think and once the acceptance kick in, I think people or employees starts to see that, hey, it has its own advantages, right, over the previous force ranking. And I think happy to share that I think today the acceptance level is pretty high. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Eric. Moving on to another question, for organizations that unfortunately did not do so well because of the pandemic and the hit, they have been adversely affected, and we can empathize with such organizations that can be in the hospitality or the entertainment industries where they were actually forced to close. How employees are still having to, in fact, work even more creatively to bring in revenues as part of their work. So how does organizations, or how would you recommend and advise organizations or managers who are facing that difficulty of recognizing it, but I don't have that much of a budget to play around with, and how can I continue driving the performance conversation and management process with my employees? If I could start with Eric first, and then I'll move on.
I think back to the part about that open and transparent conversations. I think at the end of the day, it is very important for in your examples, right? If you're an SME or a small business owner, it is definitely imperative for the boss, to be very open and transparent with his team of employees. That, hey, the company is going through extremely challenging times. This is a new normal, and we are fighting for our survival. And if you are on board with me, we're gonna fight it out together. And while times may be tough, and we may not have the budget for a very attractive pay raise this year, but I think there are other ways to recognize the employees and the team. So I think to me it's back to a lot of that openness, that transparency, and that communication, and to seek that mutual support, and that we are in this together, and let's get through this together as a team. And definitely, from the boss's perspective, I think he or she could do loads, right, in terms of that encouragement, that in terms of ensuring the mental well-being of the team members, as mentioned earlier, and so much more.
Thank you so much, Eric. In my work with organizations as well, we have heard certain industries having had to cut salaries, right? But I think one of the best practices that I've heard from organizations is the leadership, the moment where their economy picks up, but the business starts to recover, immediately the leadership starts to reinvest in their people to say that thank you for wading this through with us. We want to reinstate your salaries. We want to give what we can and do a tiered approach. So that's where they look at helping to build confidence and buy trust or buy back the trust from their employees. So for Zarina, in your work with your clients and your organizations that you work with, what were some of the practices, especially in terms of the COVID-driven, COVID-hit organizations?
Yeah, Jude. Really, during such times, right, we go back to what it is that TAFEP and the tripartite partners have been saying to organizations, and that is really about the flexible wage system. During such times, actually, companies really need to have a quick way to re-level their expenditures. One big item of which is wage cost, right? And if they have a flexible wage structure within the organization, then one of the things that they could do is actually to either freeze salaries or cut salaries in some cases where business is really bad. And really to be able to do that, they would be able to sustain the business. And if you can sustain the business, then you can sustain employment for the employees. Because really at the end of the day, you do want to keep as many employees as possible because there is a future ahead, right? COVID is not going to be with us forever. It's going to get out of it. And we are going to have all of our employees with us to be able to ramp up quickly. So the way to do it is to manage your costs as best you can and to keep your employees with you as long as you can. And if you have a flexibility within the compensation structure, then you can do it a lot better. How do you then, get the employees engaged to be with you in this journey that is, what Eric has mentioned? It is to be able to engage them, explain to them why the company has to do this. It is not like we're taking an opportunity to cut your wages. No, it is about sustaining the business. And as soon as the company gets better, gets out of this rut, it's temporary rut. As soon as we get out of it, then to give back to the employees, the whatever wage cuts that has been levied on them, which many companies have done so in the recent months, as well as if companies are doing well enough to even give a better increment this year or give a better bonus this year, and use that flexibility to show that the whole flexibility in the structure is about good rewards in good times, as well as being able to sustain the business during bad times. So it is every employee feeling as part, almost like a business owner, that you ride with the good times and you handle the bad times as well.
Thank you so much, Zarina. Yeah, it's time to, it's in a sense telling your employees, when it's time to celebrate, we celebrate and we celebrate well. But when it's time to pull up our socks, we do that together as a team. I think that's the crux of it all. It's amazing to hear some organizations that actually do that very effectively. And it all starts with, like what Eric says, management. Leadership needs to drive that. So one other questions that came in is, nowadays in organizations, it's no longer one manager managing a large team. Sometimes it's really managing just one or two people. It's very lean, and even sometimes maybe even in matrix kind of reporting styles, right? Especially in the consulting mode, you don't have that. You might have a direct boss, but you work with so many people. So how do you then manage performance and conversations and assess performance? And because now it's such lean teams, especially during COVID, has shaved off a couple of number of the workforce. How do organizations, or how should managers look at recognizing and assessing performance for employees that might be pulling more than their own weight because of a reduced team size? If I could ask Vishesh, please.
Yeah, thanks. And global organizations are complex, right? And we have a system called entity manager and functional manager for people who will report to somebody in Asia Pacific. So it's very much within our system. The functional manager drives the performance and they seek feedback. So as an employee, I'll be told which are the people that feedback should be taken from me. It's not only my line of reporting, but the stakeholders that you support, so that it's a very 360-degree holistic view and it's not decided by one or two people. Hence, that's why we call it, we succeed collectively. And it's very important that we all know that, you are not only supporting a particular manager, but you're supporting an organization or the team which is trying to deliver. So it's very much part of the system. I can seek feedback as an employee and then share it. It goes to my manager, or a manager can seek, whether it's through entity or which of the part of the globe you are supporting. And some people work on projects like you might not be working in Singapore or even Asia Pacific. But if I've had 3 months significantly, say for a US market or UK market, that period, the feedback can be. So it's very important part of it, that how do you get that, relevant feedback, and it's recorded kind of, which can be shared with them.
Thank you so much, Vishesh. Maybe turning over to you, Eric, before we close today's session. Any insights with regards to that as well? Lean teams.
Can you come again, Jude?
Yeah, I was just wondering, if you have any inputs as well with regards to lean teams where managers had to only manage 1 or 2, or maybe in matrix kind of reporting structures, but it's not so easy to assess and manage performance. How does organizations such as FedEx deal with that?
Yeah, actually, it's not so much of a lean team situation for us, and I think to the earlier point by yourself and to Vishesh, I think how we work in FedEx today is that, there's a lot of collaboration going on. There's a lot of engagements, a lot of joint work between various business partners. So I think there's a lot of teamwork, a lot of cohesiveness going on. Yeah, and I think in today's COVID situation, that gets a little bit harder, over the last 20 months or so, whereby in the FedEx context, from the operations front of it, we are essential services. So people are still in the office, including myself. But I think on the back end, a lot of our business, key business partners, they are working from home. Yeah, but I think over the last 20 months or so, a lot of people, including all of us here on the audience, we have gotten a lot better in terms of managing that virtual connectivity and staying in touch and staying engaged. So I think that is the key. And I think in my mind, it has gotten to be even more productive in one way or another compared to before. I think, but of course, everybody, including myself, I think we all miss that human touch, where we could shake somebody's hand, we could give somebody a pat on the shoulder, we could see somebody face to face. Yeah, but I think that's the way it is for now. And yeah, we just have to adapt and make the best out of it.
Thank you very much. I think I've received quite a bit of questions with regards to the performance structure and the rigidity of the audiences, organizations, where they find it a little bit difficult to move away. So maybe if you could share some, I guess some of the critical insights for organization, maybe from Eric, from your point of view and leadership, how did FedEx make that move in terms of, what kind of stakeholders needed to be involved, what kind of decision-making process to pull away from a rigid performance rating bell curve structure? How do you bring the whole organization along and inspire that change?
Yeah, definitely, Jude. Yeah, I think that, as I mentioned earlier, that certainly didn't come as an overnight decision or overnight implementation. So there was a lot of thought process going on in the back end, and some rationale as to why we want to make that change. And in the FedEx context, that was about 3 years ago. Yeah, so I think definitely in terms of who were the people involved, definitely our HR business partners, and our various functional stakeholders, including operations, finance, marketing, and so on, right? So I think, and I think what we did well as well, we go down to the front line and we get small focus groups going on to seek the feedback from down to the frontline employees and the line management. And we consolidate all this feedback, and then we bring it back and to deliberate amongst our teams, and then definitely try to take into consideration as much as possible and adapt as much as possible the various feedback put from the ground. So I think it is a journey, and it is about transformation. It is about change management. It is about lots and lots of communication sessions to get to where to get to the eventual implementation. And the journey doesn't stop there, Jude, right? I think as I mentioned earlier on in my presentation sharing as well, I think as the world evolves, as the situation changes, I think we continue to adapt and to make decisions, including performance managements related to performance managements that are most suitable for our company and our employees at a particular point in time.
Thank you so much, Eric. And if I could just turn to Vishesh on HSBC, likewise the same question. How did HSBC deal with that?
I think to me, what is the purpose, right? When you do anything, you go back to employees and ask feedback. Is it making sense? The purpose of performance management is that everybody performs to that potential. Is the performance going up? If you get a feedback that these are the pain points, the manager saying too much time consuming, too much complex, mid-year ratings, your force fitting of bell curve. So you have to make tweaks, and then you look at what are the external best practices. And that has been the journey for us. The simple thing is it driving better employee motivation? Is it helpful to our managers? Is it a simple process? Is it development oriented? Is it future focused? And that's a continuous journey that the organizations have to take in every process. It's not only performance management. I think everything you do, it has to be, what is the improvement you are trying to do? You do something not for the sake of doing it. At the same time, I totally understand there are regulatory considerations, especially in financial services where the regulators expect you to be very formalized, whereas you would like to be informal. So how do you keep that balance, especially global organizations which have got different regulators in different markets? But the end goal is progressive, helping employees thrive, helping your people managers, and is it making business sense? So simple from that perspective, I would say.
Thank you so much, Eric and Vishesh, for your sharing. If I could just, synthesize that, and a shout out to a couple of mentees I have that I see as part of the participants list here today. We always start with the why, right? When we talk about performance management, we need to know where are we driving, what are we achieving, and that's what Vishesh really clearly mentioned. The second step is really about getting leadership buy-in, as Eric shared. The leadership needs to be convinced and aligned of driving certain change, and it doesn't happen overnight. The third step is really about engaging the ground, your line managers, your rank and file, and telling them the purpose of the why. Why are we doing the things that we are doing? And fourth, I cannot emphasize this enough. It's communicate, right? It's always keeping people in the loop and understanding why. And having, I think Zarina mentioned a little bit about this earlier, about the level of transparency that you have with your people on the ground as well. And last but not least, it's about the iterative loop. It's not a one-time exercise about changing. It's about looking at growing with the times and adapting with the times. And things are changing at a much, much more rapid pace as compared in the past. So it's about having that iterative loop. So we've come to close to the end of today. For those that questions from amongst the audience that I didn't manage to address, I apologize, but feel free to drop us. Any of us, if you have any follow-on questions, we'll be happy to address them. I would just like to take the last 5 minutes to just have some closing remarks from all our speakers here today. So if I could start with you, Eric.
Thank you, Jude. So for myself, I think I firmly believe that leadership is a foundation upon which the team performance is built. And it must emerge from and cascade down to those in customer-facing roles to drive goal execution. This would imply that it needs to reach our frontline employees, such as our couriers in the context of FedEx, who interact with our customers on a daily basis. Now, this is an ongoing journey, as I mentioned earlier, and we need to recognize the importance of continuously looking at improving the overarching employee experience by encouraging ongoing learning and communicating rigorously and frequently. Human performance to me is the function of many influences: accountability, feedback, motivation, skills and knowledge, rewards and recognition. These influences are interdependent and ultimately result in the desired performance. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. If I could then turn to Vishesh, please.
Yeah, thanks. So first of all, really enjoyed the past couple of hours. It has been, I don't know how this couple of hours go. I would say is whether you are a HR professional, whether you are an employee or a manager, we are living in very, challenging or interesting times. The nature of workforce is changing. The nature of work is changing. Home is becoming work. Work is becoming home. So it's all blurred lines. I think the importance of conversations engaging on performance, getting clarity is really on everybody. We all should take whatever efforts we can in our individual roles and be really front-footed approach in trying to do that, because that will really help address a lot of issues and help us as professionals to really drive that better value and create a positive impact on the business impact. Because if people thrive, if people are able to give their best, at the end, it will result in good performance and help us come out of the current challenges that we have.
Thank you so much, Vishesh. And Serena, your closing thoughts, please.
Really is about the performance at the company level. What it is actually a collective effort of all of the employees. So if you can engage the employees enough, motivate them enough to perform to their best possible, then collectively the company can perform at its best level as well. So for that to happen, managers need to be very much aware of their responsibilities and be able to do it well. And the assessment of performance has to be holistic. It's not only about what is delivered, but more importantly, it's about how it is delivered. So the behavioral aspects of it, how the employee treats his team members, whether he takes him along when he does well, or he selfishly credits only himself, or whether he performs for his unit at the expense of the company. So all of those things matter so much in being able to assess whether individuals are performing well or not. And if you can assess it correctly and you can reward those employees correctly, then the company collectively will do a lot better.
Thank you so much, Serena. Cynthia, over to you, please.
Yeah, in addition to what my co-panelists have mentioned today, I think very, very importantly is really performance management is a springboard into the future. So we're not just looking at how we're doing today, but we really want to know how we can do better in the forthcoming years, because you want to be really contributing to the sustainability of the business, sustainability of employment as well, and how do we build that talent pipeline. And we can't do it if we don't have the conversations today, if we don't have the systems to support people in their training and development and their career progression as well. And we certainly can't do it if your line managers are not, don't see themselves as pivotal to this success as well. So a lot of alignment so that we can actually move businesses into a sustainable and secure future.
Thank you so much, Cynthia. For our audience here today, in your minds it might be, yes, I agree, but I have to take this back to my boss and to convince them, or my managers or my whole entire organization to convince them. For some organizations, but if the ship isn't, or the thing isn't broken, why fix it, right? And some of them might have certain, I guess, because they are just so entrenched in the current practice, it's very difficult to encourage or inspire them to move onwards and forwards in a more progressive manner. If you have any issues, feel free to connect them with all our speakers here today to learn about it. I think it's really about starting the why. And if you think about it, if it's not now, then when would it ever happen, right? We recall 1980s, we had that performance bell curve. We see organizations changing, but there's still so much more that can be done. And we, as the speakers here, have done so in their own respective organizations, but you have the power to change it in your own respective organizations. And we can, as a community, a HR community and a leadership community, continue to build best practices here in Singapore. And so if you heard how HSBC and FedEx has transformed themselves, it's not an overnight thing, so keep at it. Don't lose hope, don't lose steam over it. Continue to engage, continue to build that relationship with leadership to help them understand and align to that why, because it took years to build that culture, and they are continuing to do better. So always have that continuous review of the performance management process. If there's anything, TAFEP and our distinguished panelists here and speakers here, we will be happy. I'm selling them now. We'll be happy to engage organizations to share their own practices. And you can always tap on the case studies that TAFEP will be sharing as part of the implementation toolkit. So maybe that can be a conversation opener for you and your organization. So thank you very much, distinguished panelists, Eric, Vishesh, Serena, Cynthia, for your time today. And thank you, TAFEP, for giving us this opportunity to engage. Over back to you, Jason.
So ladies and gentlemen, a very big thank you to panelists Zarina, Cynthia, Eric, and Vishesh for your generous sharing. We have really learned a lot, not just about the practices, but the thought processes and efforts behind your organization's performance management processes. And also a very big thank you to our moderator, Jude, for bringing out the amazing insights from the panelists. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm sure you have enjoyed today's session, and we would like to have your feedback on today's webinar. Please kindly spend a few moments to scan the QR code you see on the screen to leave us some feedback, and also do remember to provide us with your email address so that we will be able to send you the implementation toolkit. So while everyone is scanning the code, taking out your phones, we would like to express our sincere thanks once again to our special guests, Jude, Cynthia, Zarina, Eric, and Vishesh. So we have come to the end of today's program. Thank you everyone for your participation, and we hope to see you in part 3 of this webinar series in the coming months. Take care everyone, stay safe, and I wish you a pleasant afternoon ahead. See you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.